Hello, you may or may not know me. My name is Enne, and I work in the Adult and Teen Services Department here at Fountaindale Library. My pronouns are he, him. I've been here for a few months now, and this will be my second video where I'm going to give some book reviews and some thoughts about some books I've read, and I'm going to try to stick to the theme. So this time, because it's October and it's the time of year, I am going to do my own twist on a book talk circling around horror as a theme. I do want to take a moment to explain that genre is really large and encompassing. There are a lot of subgenres within it, which means there can be books that maybe are more similar to a fantasy novel, but they're still considered horror because they have elements that are more gruesome or scary or psychological. You've got gothic horror, you've got paranormal, like with ghosts and things like that, vampire stories. So there's a lot of overlap between the genres. That does happen a lot. For me, when I tend to read books, I don't want to be scared. I am a massive baby and I will get scared very easily. So I tend to stay away from super scary things or from books that I know are going to be alarming or scary or something of that nature. So there will be a blog that I've got put out, and there I'm going to delve a little bit more into some subgenres and give some recommendations for each genre based on what's popular and what other people like to read. Here, though, we're going to talk about some of the ones that I liked, and a couple that did scare me a lot, and that I will not be rereading ever. So we'll see what we can come up with, and I want to know what you like. And if you're a horror fan, this might seem a little basic to you. I want to know what you read. What do you like about horror? What do you like about scary books? Is it the adrenaline? Is it the content? Like, I'm fascinated, so let's talk. But for now, I'm going to start with a short story collection. So Neil Gaiman, Trigger Warning, is a collection that he wrote a few years ago, and some of these pieces he had written years before, and it was just compiled in 2015. You may know Neil Gaiman because American Gods had that television adaptation recently that did pretty well. Good Omens is also an adaptation of a book that he wrote with Terry Pratchett. He mostly writes fantasy. Trigger Warnings is housed in the fiction collection rather than fantasy because some of the stories have no element of supernatural or suspense or oddness to them. But what is different about this collection in particular is that he did try to choose specifically stories that maybe were more disturbing or needed a trigger warning. He named the book very intentionally for that concept, and I enjoyed it. I listened to it as an audiobook while I was driving rather than read it because I like how Neil Gaiman narrates his own writing, and I really enjoyed it. There's a Doctor Who story in here, and I'm a big Doctor Who fan. There's a continuation of like a little mini American Gods story. So if you are a fan of his work, you'll recognize some things, and if you've never read anything by him before either, it'll all still make sense. So it's a good place to start if you don't want something that's truly frightening or truly unsettling, but you kind of maybe want to dip your toes into the water. Neil Gaiman is always a good place to go. He's an accessible author. He's supposedly a good guy. I follow him a little bit, and that's important to me. It's not important to everybody when they're reading, but I do recommend this one a lot for a lot of different types of readers. One of the other genres that intersects with horror a little bit is dark fantasy. So you get that a little bit. That's like the witches and the vampires, and sometimes there's some romancy stuff in there. So my favorite author for dark fantasy is Anne Bishop. We have a few of her books here. This one is one of her newer ones. This is The Queen's Weapons. You don't need to have read her entire catalog to pick this one up. If you have, it does make a little more sense. This is like the start of the next generation of her really popular characters that she's been writing since the 90s for her Black Jewel series. And it's a world with magic, where people have different levels of ability, and then they have to, learn how to use their magic, obviously. But it's also a world in which the women are always more powerful overall. So it's got some really interesting feminist questions, and even though it is still definitely romancy, there is that element of the supernatural with the magic and with evil being in the world, and there's a realm that is basically the realm of the dead. So even though it's not overtly scary at all, and even I wasn't scared by it, it's got those dark elements to it, so that would still push it over into that genre. And I like all of her stuff. She's got settling. I've got a psychological horror here. So Grady Hendrix, my best friend's Exorcism, is the first book I read of his. He also wrote a book called Horror Store, which I wish I had a copy of to show because it's just funny to me. It's made to look like an IKEA catalog, and the story takes place through the pages, and it's creepy. My best friend's Exorcism is similar. It's about high school girls, so when you open it up, it looks like the inside of a yearbook. And so the first bunch of pages, and even the last bunch of pages, looks like signed yearbook, and it's all pertinent to the plot. But it follows two girls and their friendship, and maybe a demonic possession, maybe not. It's very psychological though. I still don't really have an answer for whether or not it really was an exorcism, but it stuck with me because of the friendship and how the book ends, kind of recapping what high school friendships look like as you age and as the things you experienced and lived through change and aren't the things holding you together anymore. But also I was deeply unsettled. I might read it again because I don't remember being terrified, but it's creepy in an uncomfortable way. Also uncomfortable, Mira Grant, Parasite. This is the first in one of her trilogies. She also has another trilogy about zombies that's really good that starts with Feed. But Parasite is about a literal stomach tapeworm that is developed that helps humanity fight disease. Pick it up. You may know who she is because she also goes under the name Seanan McGuire, so she writes other fantasy novels under a different name. Her Mira Grant books tend to be the creepier, scarier, weirder, dealing with corruption in the government and the CDC, so kind of timely even though her books are older. The Newsflash trilogy that I read first, which is the zombie one, was definitely years ago at this point, and this book itself was even 2013, so it's not new, but the longer we've been living through a COVID-19 pandemic, the more uncomfortable I am with books that have themes of illness, because it just hits in a different way. It feels more real, it feels more likely, and it's scarier to me because I know what a pandemic looks like now. I'm alarmed by it, and biological warfare is kind of freaky to me. Not everybody's going to be scared of that or consider it horror, but I certainly do. Too much for me. Also too much for me, The Walking Dead. That was quite a segue. I hope you like it. The Walking Dead comics are black and white, and they are clever, and they are well illustrated. And I have read a bunch of them, and they give me nightmares after the fact. And I don't think it's the illustration, because looking at these pages doesn't bother me. It gets a little creepy. Gory for sure, but it's in black and white, so it almost kind of tones down the gore level, but it's the classic zombie comic book. The TV show was wildly popular. I could never watch that either, so even though I have read some of these, it's less about zombies and more about humans becoming monsters, because what happens to humanity, and I don't agree that this is what would happen in a post-apocalyptic world, but zombies as a theme seems to be pretty popular in dystopian fiction and apocalyptic fiction, and I think that of all of the zombie novels, I still gear more towards The Walking Dead, or I think my theme is I am unsettled by psychological implications of what being a monster is. And so now I'm going to talk about some books that actually scared the daylights out of me. Annihilation, Jeff Vandermeer. Jeff Vandermeer writes a lot of really unsettling books. He's not considered horror for some reason. His books are freaky, though, especially Annihilation. It's the first in a trilogy, and there's this area that shows up. They call it Area X. Nobody knows what it is. It's got like a force field around it, and everything inside of it is weird. And all of the expeditions we send in there go horribly wrong or strange or freaky. And we're following now the 11th expedition in, and what they see. It's 4 women, an anthropologist, a surveyor, a psychologist, and a biologist. And the story is told by the biologist. So you get some unsettling information about what is happening to the ecosystem of Earth in this area. And what's most frightening is that you never get any answers. It's, I heard a rustle in the grass. It's, I can hear a thing talking to itself. It's, I see the writing on the wall that something left behind. Very creepy. I had a hard time being in the dark after I read it. What made it less creepy was reading the sequel and the 3rd book in the trilogy, and I feel like it almost ruined the effect that the 1st book had, because it gave me answers, but they were kind of stupid answers. I think if you read the 1st book and you stop, yes, there's questions that are unanswered, but I almost think that that feeling of unsettled, unresolved issue is what makes it so powerful. I do recommend reading it if you think you can handle that kind of weird, unseen, out of the corner of your eye kind of fear. I know there was a movie a few years ago with Natalie Portman, and I can't. I know it's going to scare me. I might read the book again one day. I might not. It's pretty freaky. I don't know. Also gave me nightmares. Bird Box. I read it because I watched the Netflix movie, and that was a bad idea because I read it really fast and I didn't think it was all that creepy, and then 2 weeks later I couldn't like look out the window at night. If you are unfamiliar with the plot, it's, I don't know. We don't know. We never get the answer. Aliens, maybe, monsters of some sort, but basically if you look at them, you go insane. So the survivors have holed up in a house and they close all the windows off, and it's really, really creepy. And it's sad because the book, I mean, takes place over years, and eventually the main character has kids, and like this is the only life that they know. And it just is unsettling in that same way. I try not to think about it too hard because I will not sleep tonight now that I've talked about it. And that's just because I'm a wuss. But I think it's well done. I think the movie did a good job, but the book is definitely better. And I'm not the kind of person that just says that immediately. I think there are instances of adaptations being better than the book, but this book is quite excellent. Especially if you're into the psychological aspect, because again, you don't get answers. You don't know. We don't really ever know what the things are. They're never really talked about too much. It's just creepy. And then I couldn't make a horror video at a library like ours, where we have multiple shelves of Stephen King books, without talking about Stephen King. I read about 1/3 of his work. Some of it is creepy to me. And some of it I just avoid because I know it'll scare me. Pet Sematary is the one that I will never read. And part of it's because I am a massive animal lover. I have 5 dogs and a snake, and I am friends with all of the feral neighborhood cats, and my friends have cats. I cannot read about animals. And then also because it's like, I don't even know what the plot is. I just know it's like animals are coming back from the dead as zombies or something. Yeah, the graveyard, and yeah, no thank you. Stephen King, I don't think he's a fantastic author personally. I think his endings are terrible, but he comes up with some pretty freaky worlds, and when you talk about modern horror, Stephen King is who most people think of and who most people reference, and that's great. But I had all these other books too that I think are really good and worth a shot. If you like Stephen King, because he's not super gory and super creepy in that way, you might like some of these other books. Most of the books that I just talked about, like I said, they focus on that psychological aspect. To me, the scariest things out there are what human beings are capable of. I don't believe in the supernatural, so it doesn't scare me always in the same way. Sometimes at 2 in the morning I wake up, it's dark, nobody in my house is awake, and I'm terrified that something's gonna come eat me. Not logical. fear doesn't make loud. I liked all of these books, whether they freaked me out or not. I don't regret ever having read a book, and I'll certainly stop if something bothers me too much. So I have finished all of these books. And I think that is the biggest endorsement I personally can give to reading a freaky, creepy, scary book. Is that if I finished it, it's got something redeeming to it. So I'd be interested to know what you're reading, if you're reading anything for October, if you read horror all year round, or if you want to dip your toe in the genre and try something maybe not super scary. I am definitely your guy, because that's what I do too. If you want something really scary, I can find that for you too. It's just probably on my list of I'm never going to read that book. But we can talk about it, and I would love to know what you think and what you like to read. And hopefully I'll be back in November and we'll do a different genre and we'll talk about some more stuff then. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you later.